My Zadie lived with us in my parents' home. He used to laugh, he put me on his knee. He spoke about his life in Poland. He spoke with a bitter memory. And he spoke about the soldiers who would beat him. They laughed at him, they tore his long black coat. And he spoke about a synagogue that they burned down. And the crying that was heard beneath the snow. But Zadie made us sing, Zadie made us laugh, Zadie made a Kiddush Friday night. Oh Zadie, oh my Zadie, how I love him so. And Zadie used to teach me wrong from right. Oh Zadie, oh my Zadie, how I loved him so. And Zadie used to teach me wrong from right. His eyes lit up when he would teach me Torah. He taught me every line so carefully. He spoke about our slavery in Egypt and how God took us out to make us free. But winter went by, summer came along. I went to camp to run and play. And when I came back home, they said, Zadie's gone. And all his books were packed and stored away. Now I don't know how or why it came to be. It happened slowly over many years. We just stopped being Jewish like my Zadie was. And no one cared enough to shed a tear. But Zadie made us sing, Zadie made us laugh, Zadie made a Kiddush Friday night. Oh Zadie, oh my Zadie, how I loved him so. And Zadie used to teach me wrong from right. Oh Zadie, oh my Zadie, how I miss him so. And Zadie used to teach me wrong from right. Am Israel, Am Israel, Am Israel Chai. 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 Od Avinu Chai. Hey, Od Avinu Chai. Hey, Od Avinu, Od Avinu, Od Avinu Chai. Od Avinu Chai. Od Avinu Chai. Od Avinu, Od Avinu. Od Avinu Chai.
Hello, I'm Deborah Polsky, Executive Director of the Dallas Jewish Historical Society, and I want to welcome you to our 2021 One Story at a Time program, Viva Shalom, honoring Latin American Jews in Dallas. Both the Latin American Jewish community and the Dallas Jewish Historical Society have a long, rich history in Dallas. While the work of DJHS, collecting the stories, the past and present of the Dallas Jewish community, began in 1971, the first family from Cuba, the Bramnicks, arrived nearly 10 years earlier, adding to a Jewish community that had been growing and thriving for nearly 100 years. The stories told through our oral history project of this most welcome, varied, and far-reaching Jewish community tell of different waves of immigration to Latin America. From the conversos of 15th century Spain and Portugal to the late 19th and early 20th century Jews fleeing from Eastern European pogroms and Middle Eastern strictures, to pre- and post-World War II Jews running for their lives from the dark cloud of the Nazi and Stalinist regimes. All left seeking the freedom to be Jews and to make a new life for their families. We want to thank all those who already have and will in the future share their Jewish stories, as well as those important volunteers who captured them. At the Dallas Jewish Historical Society, we are in the business of remembering, of being the keeper of your stories. This is a place where your history can live, whether through personal collections for which we provide a home in our archive vault, through oral history interviews that allow your voices to continue throughout the generations, and through exhibits that share your stories with the community. Through our archive collections of photos, documents, family organization and business records, and other items of interest being preserved physically as well as in a public database, we preserve your voices for the future of your family and our community. Our vision is to connect present and future generations with Jewish Dallas. We believe that those families who know and pursue their history remain rooted in their communities and connected to one another. We hope you'll consider joining us by allowing us to help you connect with and share your past, and by becoming a member of the Dallas Jewish Historical Society. Our thanks go out to the Jewish Federation of Greater Dallas, whose annual gift helps make it possible for us to do what we do, to our sponsors without whom this event would not be possible, with a giant shout out to our event chairs, Fonda Arbetter and Susan Shackman, and to our DJHS staff, Jenny Clays and Jessica Snyder. Special thanks go to the artists and others who donated to our raffle and our other in-kind sponsors. We hope you enjoy the program. And now I'd like to introduce you to Jeanette Pincus, our fundraising chair, without whom this event would not have been possible. Jeanette was really the person who kept the gears running the whole time. Thank you.
Deborah, thank you so much for your introduction. The Dallas Jewish Historical Society has been so lucky to have you as our executive director. Again, my name is Jeanette Pincus. I feel very fortunate to have grown up in Dallas with a Jewish community that has been so much a part of my life. My roots run very deep, with my great-grandfather, Frank Byers, being the first president of Tiferet Israel and one of the first kosher butchers in town. I'd like to tell you a little bit why I have such a deep and special connection with the Dallas Jewish Historical Society. My parents were dear friends with the founder, Ginger Jacobs, and her husband, Mike, who, by the way, was a founder of the Dallas Holocaust Museum. To have a front row seat of this untiring couple in action during my youth was an incredible honor. The founding of the Dallas Jewish Historical Society was so important for our community because no other organization was dedicated and focused on preserving the Jewish history of our city until Ginger Jacobs took it on 50 years ago. She had the vision, and because of all the dedicated people after her, I, as well as so many of our Jewish community members, will have an accurate historical window into the Dallas Jewish past, and not just folklore or stories handed down. Every one of you has the opportunity to record and preserve your story, no matter where you're from. Do this for your descendants and future extended family. They may just want to know a little more about you. Now I have the pleasure of introducing and thanking two very special women, my two co-chairs, Susan Shackman and Fonda Arbetter, who I've enjoyed working with so much in planning this virtual event. From our homes to yours, celebrating our vibrant and very welcomed Latin Jewish community.
Thank you, Jeanette. It has been a great honor to be on the board of the Dallas Jewish Historical Society and to be co-chair of Viva Shalom along with Fonda and Jeanette. As we honor the Latin American Jewish community. I have long ties with the Dallas Jewish community. My mother was raised in South Dallas and taught Sunday school at Temple Emmanuel. Her family owned a drugstore near Fair Park called Forest Avenue Drugstore. She and my father were married by Dr. Rabbi David Lefkowitz, for whom Lefkowitz Chapel was named. I was raised in Waco and have lived in Dallas since I married my husband, Joe Shackman, almost 56 years ago. He is a native Dallasite whose family has been very active in the Jewish and secular communities. In fact, his grandmother, Bertie Shackman, was the first president of Tiferet Israel Sisterhood. I have been active in the community for many years and helped to start Family Outreach, a child abuse center in conjunction with National Council of Jewish Women and the Dallas County Child Welfare Agency. I'm very involved with genealogy, which first brought me to the Dallas Jewish Historical Society, because it is so important for our children and our grandchildren to know their roots in Dallas and beyond.
Thank you very much, Susan. Hi, my name's Fonda Arbetter, and I'd like to thank my co-chairs, Jeanette and Susan, and the Dallas Jewish Historical Society staff for their diligence in preparing for this evening's event. They have all been a pleasure to work with. My interest in the history of Jewish Dallas came about due to the fact that both of my grandmothers were born in Dallas, one in 1904 and the other in 1907. My grandfathers also arrived in Dallas early in their lives. One came at the age of 12 and the other at the age of 20. My grandparents, Abe and Libby Sheps, founded Sheps Grocer Supply in downtown Dallas in 1939, and it was sold in 1984. My great-grandparents, Nathan and Frida Sheps, founded Sheps Dairy in Russia, but continued with it in Dallas after they immigrated through Galveston in the early 1900s. So you see, we do go way back. In fact, I'm very proud that the Sheps family has had very deep roots in Dallas through business, volunteerism, and philanthropy. I'm also extremely proud of the fact that Dallas has been so welcoming to Jewish people from around the world, from places like Russia, South Africa, and Latin America. Each new Dallasite who calls this city home brings a unique and personal story. One of our biggest goals and main missions is to collect and preserve them for posterity. I now have the distinct pleasure of introducing Jessica Snyder, our archivist and volunteer director. Jessica earned a BA in anthropology from the University of Colorado, Boulder. She has also earned a Master's of Art degree in museology, museum studies, from Texas Tech. We are in awe of her extensive, broad, and deep knowledge in preservation of records, documents, photographs, and keepsakes. She's also spearheading a 5-month online art show from local Jewish artists called The Colors of Judaism, starting in June. Jessica truly wears many hats, and she has a way of explaining exactly what our mission is and how she carries it out on a daily basis. Without further ado, here is Jessica.
Thanks, Susan and Fonda. History happens every day, in every place. As we go about our daily lives, we create our own history. However, what we see in the historical record represents only a fraction of lived experiences. Oral history interviews act as critical primary resources for historians, researchers, and the public to understand the circumstances and values of past generations and of their peers. The Oral History Project at DJHS is our flagship program. Since 1971, as part of our ongoing mission to tell the story of the Dallas Jewish community, we have captured nearly 1,000 interviews. And we continue to digitally record interviews with members of the Dallas Jewish community from all walks of life, preserving life's lessons and important events for future generations. We not only have an active oral history committee, but are also committed to expanding our scope. Our oral history participants serve as a collective memory, communicating the values and history of different generations in the community and providing a distinctive sense of place and time. The Jewish community in Dallas is diverse, a melting pot of dynamic individuals from across the globe, representing all diaspora, which is why we actively work to record interviews from subsets of the community that highlight that diversity. This year's One Story at a Time event celebrates the Latin American Jewish community, with participants and community members from over a dozen different countries, each with unique traditions and experiences. Beyond our oral history program, the Dallas Jewish Historical Society Archive collects and preserves documents, photographs, publications, and artifacts from greater Dallas Jewish businesses, organizations, families, and individuals. Our collection materials share the story of Jewish Dallas from the 1860s through present day and ultimately shape how the community's history will be remembered for generations to come. In the following segments, you will hear from members of the Latin American Jewish community of Dallas who shared their experiences of growing up and living Jewish in their countries of origin and their transitions to life in Jewish Dallas.
And the only country they could go into was Bolivia, because all the other countries closed the doors.
So tell us the story. What did they tell you about escaping Hitler?
Well, they were there doing Kristallnacht, and my father already said to my mom, there's something going on here that is not good, and we need to get out of here. So they were both working. They had my mother was a store manager in Germany, and my dad was a salesman, clothing. And they had a daughter, my older sister, and she was about six months old. So they decided they got to get out of there, and somehow or another he gathered some money, and my grandmother married a very rich man in Germany, and he was able to put up the affidavit for them. So they had visas to go to Montevideo, but when they went to pick up their, to pick up the cards to get out of Germany, those visas were bogus. They were no good. So my dad was furious, and he said, he put his hand in his pocket, and he told the woman, he says, I have a gun in my pocket, and if you don't give me visas that are okay, I'm going to shoot you right here because I don't have anything to lose. But he didn't have a gun in his pocket. He didn't have anything. The woman was so scared and everything. He says, well, I can't do anything for you, but I'll let you get out of Germany. I'll give you the cards to get out. Go to Paris, and in Paris you will get the visas to go someplace. Right. So that's where they got they were there over a month in Paris. And at that time, Hitler hadn't gone in yet. And my mom's sister was already in Paris. And so when they got there, waited a month, and then they got visas to Bolivia. Where's Bolivia? Who knows? They didn't even know where in the map it was. But they left. They went to Bolivia. And my aunt, at that time, Hitler came in, and she was sent back to Germany and got killed there with her daughter. But I graduated high school, and but I didn't make any plans for the future. My father died when I was 16 years old, almost 17, because I didn't make any plans to go to college. It was very hard to go into college over there. So I went to the embassy, the American embassy, and I said, what does it take to get a visa to go to America? And they said, well, you have to have an affidavit, somebody sponsoring you, or a job over there. You got to register with the Selective Service, and then that's it. I said, so how long before I get a visa? About 2 weeks. I said, okay, that sounds good to me. So I went to the company that my father worked for, and I told them, I said, I want to go to America, and I need a sponsor.
Now, did you go by yourself?
By myself. Gladly, they said. And do the best you can. Because if you come back to Peru not having accomplished anything in the United States, you're going to be a loser. They're going to see you as a nothing. So you stay there and do something with your life.
My father was a jeweler, you know. He came from Syria, you know, to Cuba, because he had, you know, a brother that was already in Cuba, waiting again for visa to come to the United States, you know. And he landed there because of his, you know, brothers being there, you know. and he met my mother. We were going to be freed from dictatorship, you know. And Castro, at that time, he seems to be the leader of, you know, a group that wanted to, you know, make Cuba, I mean, free from the regime of Batista. So it was, you know, we believed that, you know, it was going to be a change.
And then what was it like when Castro took over?
Bad, very bad.
So you come to Dallas, and what was that like?
Wonderful. We had a wonderful welcome. It was a great experience. The Jewish family, you know, helped us, you know. We had an apartment already ready with food and, you know, everything we needed, you know, even flowers on our table. It was just a great experience.
When I first came to Dallas in '78, I worked as a volunteer at the Jewish Federation, mostly driving. At that time, there were a lot of the Russian immigrants that were coming to Dallas at that time, and I drove them to the doctors and help out with finding them the housing and everything. I also was part of many of the Jewish Federation events that we did, that were the galas and everything. And I participated in my synagogue. You know, I belong to Chabad with Rabbi Dubrovsky, so I've been very active in the community as well.
I'm a lover of Jewish tradition, so I'm a regular on Friday night and Saturday morning services. And there was a time where I was going also to Minyan other days of the weekend and throughout the week just to assist with that. And then more recently, I have joined Anshe Torah. And so now I'm a regular at Anshe Torah congregation here in Plano.
Good evening. My name is Reuben Davidson, and I'm a current board member for the Dallas Jewish Historical Society. Tonight, I have the privilege of introducing my father, Eli Davidson, who has not only had a major impact on my life, but also has impacted many of your lives throughout our community because he's been a part of your family's life cycle events, from your births to your bar and bat mitzvot, to your weddings, to your anniversaries, and more. I feel so lucky to be able to call him my dad, and I also really look forward to having you all hear him perform for you tonight. Take it away, Eli.
Quiero saludar a todos mis amigos de Sudamérica y traerlos acá a los Estados Unidos con un Viva Shalom Alejem. Y claro, lo primero que decimos es Hine matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov klap klap umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Everybody say after me, how good it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. One more time. How good it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem. Hey, Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem. Hey! When I was just a little girl, I asked my mother, what will I be? Will I be pretty? Will I be rich? This is what she said to me. Why? Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see. Que sera, sera. What will be, will be. Then I grew up and fell in love. I asked my sweetheart, what lies ahead? Will we have rainbows day after day? This is what my sweet, what it say? Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to to see. Que sera, sera. What will be, will be. Que sera, sera. Oh yeah.
Thank you very much, Eli, for that beautiful music. Now we'd like to show you a few more excerpts from Latin American oral histories.
Okay, so my grandparents from my mom's side came from Syria, from Aleppo, and they came to Panama. And my dad's side of the family from Poland. So I really have both sides on me, the Sephardic and Ashkenazi, but I grew up completely being a Sephardic Jew in Panama. So my mom born in Panama, my dad born in Israel. They met in Israel, and then once they got married in Israel, my dad moved to Panama and took on the Sephardic tradition. So we have a Jewish life. We went to Jewish school all the way from pre-K until high school. And, we have a very traditional Jewish life. We have Shabbat every Friday. Not so much Saturdays back then. I'm talking about over 25 years that I've moved from Panama here. But we have every Shabbat dinner. We celebrate every holiday. And always around family. We always have a Shabbat with grandparents, with cousins, and always together. And now pretty much the girls graduate and they go to college, and the young kids, after high school. Back then it was not so much like that. It was pretty much, you get a job, you get married, and that's what you do here in Panama. And I didn't have dreams really of coming to the States. It just happened to be coincidence in my life. And Ceci, my business partner, and she's one of my best friends in Panama. I came to visit her here. And that's how I met my husband, Scott. And that's how I am here. It was not by any plans or nothing like that. It was just plan it. And my husband would cook for me. And it was great until I really missed my tradition food, my Sephardic food. I want to have Shabbat dinner with my customs, with my food. So the only way to do it was getting in the kitchen and do it myself. But mostly my friends, I have amazing friends, and they are my family. And because of them, we're here and having a happy life full of friends. I mean, the Shabbat table in my house is always full, and it's my friends that fill them up. And that's amazing.
How about Cuban?
Yeah, Cuban. And then you moved?
I moved to the United States in October 1960.
October 60. Dallas, Texas?
No, to Florida, and then I was relocated over here by the highest service to Dallas.
Ah, so, and you've been here, what, for?
53 years.
53 years. Well, you...
That, and then my mother and my brothers and my sisters came back.
Tell me about your family. Were they born in Cuba, or did they?
Well, my dad was born in Beirut, Lebanon. We're Sephardic Jews. And my mom was born in Cuba.
Did you live a religious life in Cuba?
Yes, we did. We were actually, in Cuba, the majority of the Jews were Orthodox Jews. When we got out of school, which was a Jewish school, day school, and we were wearing our kippah, we had to take it out and run through the neighborhood.
Really?
Yeah. So we experienced that. They used to call us polacos, which means polished. They didn't realize that that not all Jews were Polacks. Okay, and so that's what they used in Spanish was a polacos. So you have to go through that process, which you learn to ignore. So communism, So my parents actually decided to come to the United States, but I came first with my dad, and then I was going to law school at that time, and then my brother was going to medical school. So we were against Castro from the very beginning. So we decided to leave. After I left, the next day, my brother was put in prison by the Castro regime, and he served 4.5 years in prison.
Really? What were the charges?
The charge was subversion against the regime, the revolution.
So you were active in the resistance?
Yes, we did.
Do you think they were looking for you, and that's why you got out so quick?
Well, I knew they were looking for us. Yeah, I mean, because one of the comments was when they were apprehending my brother is that they say, well, the other bird flew over. So.
It is my distinct pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Debbie Roykman, who is coming to us directly from Israel. Dr. Roykman studied sociology and political science at Hebrew University of Jerusalem. She got her master's degree in social psychology from Bar Ilana University and her PhD in sociology from National Autonomous University of Mexico. Her specialization is Jewish identity in Latin America and is a professor at several institutions in Mexico, Israel, and Chile. She is the coordinator of the educational department at the University Interactive Museum of Chile and part of the team to develop a new exhibition about the Holocaust in the same museum in Chile. Dr. Roykman lives in Israel and works as a strategic advisor on a project for the creation of a new museum about the history of the Jews in Mexico, coordinated by the Hebraica University. So without further ado, I give you Dr. Roykman.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's really an honor to be here in the event. I'm going to talk about the Latin America Jewry. Who are they and where are they from? The Latin America have many migration wave, and the first migration to Latin America was the people expulsed from Spain and Portugal that came in the 16th century. They migrate because, as I say, the expulsion from Spain, escaping from the Inquisition, and looking for religious liberty. There was the crypto Jews, or we can call them Marranos, or the new Christians. Also, we know them as conversos. But what happened with them? They really couldn't, the traditional Jewish observance of them was so weak and so secret that they, after years, they dispersed communities so many years later that all vestige of open Judaism was disappeared. Then there is another migration, second migration, that it's not so important because it was an individual migration from English, French, and German people who came in the colonial period, but they didn't want no community, so it was no important or as a community. But what happened with the third migration, the one that is the basis of our actual communities, they came in the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, then immigrate to Latin America. They were looking for a refuge from the war, from the first World War, and they were escaping from the anti-Semitic persecutions, the pogroms that were in Europe, and the discrimination, and looking for better life opportunities. They were most poor people. From where they were coming? They were coming mostly Ashkenazi Jews. What it means, they from Europe, mostly of them from Eastern Europe. Then they're coming from Northern Africa and Middle East, what we know as Mizrahim. They, most of them from Syria and Lebanon, and another Sephardi Jews that they came from the Baltics and the Ottoman Empire. And the rise of Nazism also promoted immigration to the Latin American countries. But now let's talk about the characteristic of these communities. This community, as you know, we belong to the third world, where there are acute social polarization, where Jews still seen as minority groups, not always seen them as local or natives. They are judged to have loyalties to the country they belong and to Israel. And there are countries that are political instability and recurrent economical crisis. But the Jews in Latin America are a higher than average population in the education areas, as well as in concerns to the income. They concentrate themselves in capital cities or other major metropolitan areas. And the second generation is already linguistically assimilated. What that means that they all speak Spanish as their native language. What is their mode identity? Their way of congregation, as different as in the United States, is according to the ethnicity community. That means that the ethnic elements means that the Ashkenazi, Sephardim, and Mizrahi, they belong to community based on that, on their geographical origin. With this reinforce their sense of peoplehood. And this ethnicity community mode means that maintainers of Jewish association networks, they provide religious, social, cultural, educational, welfare, and all what they need inside the communities. Even the synagogues are created around the ethnic geographical origin, and in some countries, the schools as well. The economic assimilation, most of the Jewish immigrants, when they get to the Latin America, they came without economical resources. But the second generation, they began to enter the labor market as doctors, lawyers, accountants. This starts the professional generation, and they also inserted in commercial and industrial life as well as in important sectors of cultural and academic field. What is important for this community is the Jewish Sports Center. It's very interesting how this Jewish Sports Center were many times the center of the community where they all congregate. The Jewish education. In Latin America, the emergence of the day school, the Jewish day school, as the dominant model of Jewish education, and this strengthened the Jewish identity in Latin America. Each day school have their own tendency or ideology. They have Hebrew schools, secular Zionist schools, even the Bund, by the Bund ideology, schools who teach, even now, teach Yiddish. And of course, we have religious schools as the yeshivot and midrashot. In this continent, the non-centrality of the synagogue is juxtaposed with the centrality of the Jewish school. It's very important. Another element very important in Latin America is the relationship to the state of Israel, the Zionists. It's a large percentage of immigration to Israel, aliyah, to what we say it. And many Latin American Jews are Hebrew-speaking. Zionist youth movement are very strong, relatively very strong, and have greatly influence in the informal education. There are all kinds of youth education. And in almost countries, there are Zionist institutions as the Jewish Agency or the Keren HaYesod. There is an in and out actual migration. We can see that in periods of extreme political or economical crisis in the countries, there is increase of immigration. And in the outside, many of the Jews who left Latin America in the second half of the 20th century and later have gone to the United States, Europe, and Israel, of course. The inter-immigration, it means in the Latin America itself, in the 70s, during the dictatorship that was in many Latin American countries, many Jews were exiled from the country and left, most of them, to Mexico. And more recently, Jews escaping economical collapse and rising anti-Semitic sentiment like Venezuela, they left to Miami, to Mexico City, Panama, and of course some to Israel. What are the present reality of the Jew in the Latin America community? From one side, we observe the decline of secular cultural Judaism, which is already insufficient to sustain a Jewish community or commitment. The weakness of educational networks that are transmitting identity. Now the education is more based in English than in Hebrew. weakened by the shrinking membership of the community. And from the other side, we have a religious revival that it's a global phenomenon that multiplies the number of synagogues and religious schools and provides social and economic response that the keilot, the communities, no longer can offer. Other things that have the present in the Jews in Latin America is impoverished of the community members, because the global economy has affected the middle classes in Latin America. The Zionist ideology is losing force as part of the Jewish identity. And there is the emergence of multiple Jewish identities outside the community spaces. So we can ask what is going to be in the future. The Jewish community have to respond to the needs of an increasingly diverse Jewish population, many Jewish and multiple identity, where there are multiple ways of being Jewish. In an environment of growing, from one side, growing individualization and also an expanded religiosity, as I said. And another thing that we have to think about is what are the trends in the new immigration patterns of the Jewish population when, as a result of both global mobility and insecurity and lack of horizon that is happening most in Latin America, significant segments of educational sectors, many of them of Jewish origin, of course, migrate to North America and other geographical areas. Finally, what I want to say is Latin America Jews have their own way to articulate their Judaisms, no better, no worse, just different, especially from the States, and it's constantly changing and adapting to the new reality. So really, thank you for the opportunity, and I hope there are some questions that I can answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Roykman, for such an interesting presentation. I'd like to start with this first question. Could you tell us what the current Jewish population is now in Latin America?
Okay, so that's a good question, because we are always talking about the identity, what happened with the Jewish, but how many Jews are there in Latin America? Okay. So according to Sergio de la Pergola, that he is the Jewish demographer that very serious from the Hebrew University, in 2018, that it's 3 years ago, so it's very actual, he said that the core population of the Latin America was 380,000 Jews. They were, of course, in all Latin America. The 40% of them live in Argentina with 180,000, and the 25% was in Brazil. That it's the second. It's the most largest country in Latin America, 93,200 in Brazil, and the third most big country, Jewish community, is Mexico, that is with 30%. And then there is Uruguay, Chile, Venezuela. Venezuela is a very case because they were 25,000 but in the 1990s, but now they can say that it's 70,000. That's all, but that's a country that it's with decreasing Jewish population, Venezuela. Argentina also is decreasing their Jewish population. They are leaving for Mexico City, Miami, or the United States, Spain, and Israel. These are like the countries where they are living. To Mexico is very interesting because Mexican Jews are leaving for the United States, or many, not many, but some to Israel. But many Jews from Argentina or other countries are going to Mexico. So it's very interesting, that combination, and that it's changing the Jewish identity in Mexico. So it's very interesting that the Latin America population after the United States and France, it's the biggest one. Okay, that's I hope I answered the question.
And would you elaborate on what differences there are between these different Jewish communities in the Latin American countries?
Okay, that's a very interesting because we have to understand in the context or of the place, the country, or the must contribute to determine the character, both the individual Jew as the Jewish community. So we have to consider the uniqueness of local experience, that every country, depending the country itself, it's different, the community. We can take some examples, like in Argentina, that is the oldest and largest community of Latin America. The rate, but let's say that there is a high rate of assimilation. How we measure assimilation by a mixed marriage. That's the way that we can measure assimilation. They have a big rate of mixed marriage. And it's very special because they have the attack of the Israeli embassy in '92, the attacks of the AMIA in Buenos Aires in '94. So they have anti-Semitisms, and now with the always in every one of these countries, when it's a war, when it's something in Israel, the anti-Semitism grow. They call it anti-Zionism. But I think they are both part of the anti-Semitisms. Then we have another country like Mexico. Mexico, like I said, is the third country, big country. Their population is 4,000 Jewish, and it's a very close community. It's very interesting. It's a very close community. They have Ashkenazi people, and they have these people that I say the Mizrahi community, and the Sephardi community, and they are very close. They have many day schools, and most of the children, of the Jewish children, goes to the Jewish education. So that's very different from Argentina. And at least there is Chile. What happened with Chile is the region, the country with the largest Palestinian diaspora. So that's influence what is happening what happened to the community and how they react to all these events. So that's more or less one of two examples of what the difference in the countries.
Thank you, Dr. Roykman. And for our final question, what happens with the Latin Jewry moving to and living in the United States?
Okay. So now we get to the people living in the Jewry, or the Jews living in the United States, how they call it, the Hispanic Jewry or the Latins. Okay, it's very interesting because they have like here two identities. They have the Latino identity, independent which country are they from, and the Jewish. So we're living in between. Once again, according to La Pergola, they said that in 2016 there was 227,000 Latin Jews in the States. Most of them are living in New York, Florida, and California. For them, it's they feel very good. They feel it's very interesting because they have like three kinds of identity. As a Latin American, each one from their country, they speak Spanish. They continue speaking Spanish even with their children, and they bring their own Latin American culture. They congregate with other Latinos, Jew. Okay, it's not the Argentina with the Argentinian, but if you are Jew, but you are Argentina or from Peru or from Mexico, from Chile, they like to congregate together because they feel that the Latin culture is almost the same. As Americans, that their new country, they experience the American dream. What do I mean? I mean the economic sphere and cultural diversity and pluralism that they didn't could experience in their own countries. They are not different because of being Jewish or being Latino. Because in the other countries in Latin America, you feel that you are Jew and you are different of the others. And they tell you, the general society are always telling you, oh, you are a Jew. And as Jew, it's very interesting as a Jew because they, as I told you, they come from a communal ethnic identity structure, and in the States they have to reaccommodate this structure for the religious center identity that it's in the States. In the States, they congregate depending on the affiliation and on the synagogue. When in Mexico or Argentina or wherever in Latin America, you congregate if you are Ashkenazi or if you are Sephardi, even though that is not so important nowadays, but they continue with that relation. So it's very interesting how they try to fit, but trying to, from one side try to fit, and from the other side they try to maintain their own culture, and that's very interesting. But really, there are not many researches being held about the Latin American Jews in the States, so I think it's a good time to begin with that.
Our sincere thanks to you, Dr. Roykman, for answering our questions and for enlightening us on the ever-changing Latin American Jewish communities. Your work seems very fascinating and inspiring. And now we're going to be treated once more to some of Eli Davidson's enjoyable and delightful music.
Soon the day will arrive when we will live together, and no longer shall we live in fear. And our children will smile without wondering whether on that day dark the clouds will appear. Oh yeah, wait and see what our world this could be if we shared, if we cared, you and me. One more time. Wait and see what our world this could be if we shared, if we cared, you and me. And we're gonna do it all in Hebrew, and I want everybody clapping hands. 1, 2, 3. Bashana הבאה נשב המפסת ונספור ציפורים נודדות, ילדים בחופשה, יספקו תופסת בין הבית לבין השדות. עוד תראה כמה טוב יהיה בשנה הבאה. עוד תראה כמה טוב יהיה בשנה הבאה.
As part of Viva Shalom, honoring the Latin American Jewish community in Dallas, we thought compiling a few of the recipes that these families enjoyed cooking in their countries of origin and continue their traditions today, and to remind them of home. Please continue to send your recipes. We are getting some really great ones. You can send in the recipes in your native language and of course in English. We will work on these throughout the summer. Please send them to info@djhs.org.
I'd like to give you an example of a couple of the recipes we've received for our cookbook. These are from Helene Abrams with a little paragraph about the history of the dishes. Helene's grandmother and grandfather, Bubby and Pa, were from Poland, but immigrated to Mexico because quotas for Ellis Island were capped. They eventually settled in Monterrey, Mexico, and when her mother was 18, they made their way to San Antonio. Her Bubby was an amazing cook and made wonderful creations, combining her Polish and Mexican heritage. One of them was macaroni made in a Mexican orange clay pot, and the other was avocati, a Mexican Polish guacamole, eaten with a spoon, never chips. So we look forward to seeing what kind of recipes you send us. Thank you so much. And now one more song from Dallas's Latin Jewish musical treasure, Eli Davidson, followed by our last set of oral histories. Enjoy.
I was born in Bolivia, and I learned how to speak Yiddish at the age of 5 years old. And this is the first song that I learned. And if you know the words, you can sing it with me. Open preperche, brenta paierle, unistivese, unda rebeler, kleine Kinderla, lern alle Welt. Unda rebeler, kleine Kinderla, lern alle Welt. Solche Kinderla, die denke taieru, Russe lernen du. Solche noch amul, im Tage noch amul, come salevu. Solche noch amul, im Tage noch amul, come salevu. De la sierra morena cielito lindo vienen bajando un par de ojitos negros, cielito lindo de contrabando. Ay, 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 canta y no llores, porque cantando se alegra cielito lindo loco. One more time, here we go. Ay, 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 canta y no lloren, porque cantando se alegra cielito lindo los corazones. Oh yeah!
That was the first day when April the 1st, 1933, when the stores were identified with a Mogen David and with letters, don't buy at with Jewish people and so on. And my mother called him on the phone because he traveled from Mönchengladbach to Altona, I guess, the weekends. I really don't know the exact details. And she called him and she said, I want you to come home because I'm afraid to walk on the streets. And she told him briefly what happened. And he told her, I'm taking the 3 o'clock train and you go and call up my friend so-and-so, which was a Gentile person who belonged to the SA, because he was also unemployed at that time, and tell him to put on his uniform and you and him come to the station and pick me up, which he did. And when my father saw what was happening in Germany, he couldn't believe it. And he turned around that evening and told my mother, he says, we have to leave Germany. We have to leave Germany, but we also have to leave Europe, because one day all of Europe will burn. Then he sold whatever little we had in furniture, whatever else, and bought the tickets to Peru and had exactly $1,500 left in his pocket to take care of a wife, a sister-in-law, and 2 young children, refugees, so-called refugees, to make the distinction between an immigrant and a refugee, to arrive in Lima, Peru. And there was a German, a Jewish organization, and according to the records we kept in the Jewish organization in Lima, Peru, we were the very first refugees who arrived in Lima as a result of the Jews escaping from Germany as a result of the persecution.
Religious persecution. In synagogue, nothing. So, because in my case, my husband's parent, his parent came from Polonia, and all the other families, they didn't want to show that really the Jewish, because recently they were, killing that was past the war. And my father-in-law didn't want to show that they were Jewish. They want to hide them and to keep them forever. And we began to study, we began to be together, like a couple, to study the Torah, like by ourselves, trying to understand. And yeah, we decided, okay, it's time maybe to be together and to do something. And one of them said, okay, our parents really, I have my grandparents, and they are going to accept to die. And it's a good idea to have a piece of land for the cemetery. So we bought a piece of land of the cemetery that I have the document with us that we have a part, you know, of the. So my husband began to learn how to do to be a Hebrew Kadisha, to be like a member, and yeah, they were learning.
I was very fortunate to be able to interview my grandfather before he died. And he used to come from a very small shtetl in Poland. He saw the writing on the wall, the degree of anti-Semitism at the time. And as a very young boy, he was only 13 when he left, he took the first ship that he could that was coming to America. And for him, I mean, it's not as if he had Google or a travel agency. America was from anywhere from the North Pole to the South Pole. And the ship made a stop in Costa Rica. That port looked as good as any he had ever seen, and he just stepped out, you know, at a very young age. I can't imagine, you know, what it was like. And that's how he ended in Costa Rica.
Do you know about what year this was?
This was before the war. I don't know the exact year. Actually, it was at the beginning of, you know, we cannot say the beginning of the anti-Semitism because there has always been anti-Semitism in Europe, especially in Poland. But it was before World War II.
And he was traveling by himself?
He traveled by himself. Years later, he brought his brother. And that's pretty much the history of the Jews, the Jews in Costa Rica. One brought another one, and a neighbor told a neighbor, and a cousin told a cousin, and you know, there was most of the Jews initially in Costa Rica were from Poland. In the Jewish community, it was a very small, close Jewish community, and they practiced Orthodox Judaism, even though none of us were Orthodox. So it was kind of a modern Orthodox. My grandfather used to walk to the shul. We used to have Shabbat dinners every Shabbat, but we were not really religious. We just were part of this Orthodox Polish community.
I'd like to remind all of our virtual guests this evening that if you haven't already bought raffle tickets, the raffle is open till 10 p.m. tonight. You still have time. Please see the website on your screen for purchases of the raffle tickets. Our winners will be notified tomorrow and will also be posted on our website, djhs.org. Some of our raffle prizes are from very distinguished artists in our community and on the national level. There are some of one-of-a-kind pieces. Now is an opportunity to own a George Tobolowsky, Gary Eisenstadt, Jeff Rosansky, Fanny Hartman, the late Morton Rachowski, or Jeff Rosenfeld. Good luck to everyone.
Good evening. My name is Stuart Rosenfield, and I'm the president of the Dallas Jewish Historical Society. We hope you had a fun and informative evening, and maybe you learned something you didn't know about the enormous impact the Latin American Jewish community has had on Dallas during the last few decades. I think you would all agree with me that it is quite amazing what some of them had to go through to make a new life. Before we end tonight, I have several people to thank. Thank you to our incredible co-chairs, Fonda Arbetter, Jeanette Pincus, and Susan Shackman, for your long hours in making this event such a success. Thank you to our Executive Director, Deborah Polsky, Archivist, Jessica Snyder, and Office Manager, Jenny Clays, for not only your efforts on this program, but for the exceptional work you do the rest of the year. Thank you to our board members, who provided many great ideas and helped with the fundraising efforts. Thank you to all who attended our virtual program tonight, and a big thank you to our generous sponsors, without whom we could not maintain the mission of the Dallas Jewish Historical Society. If tonight's program has intrigued you about our organization, please look us up on the web at djhs.org to see the magnitude of everything we do. And if you would like to become a member, we offer several different levels of memberships which can be easily accessed at that same website. We would be so appreciative. Next year is the 50th anniversary for the Dallas Jewish Historical Society, and in the spring of 2022, we will be having a big in-person event to mark this milestone. We look forward to seeing you there. In closing, on behalf of our co-chairs, board of directors and staff, thank you again for attending this evening. Good night.